In Dungeons & Dragons, pets can be hard to manage for your players who want them. So I created a system to help you do just that. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about it. In this video, we're talking about pets, and specifically, we're talking about falconry. I think that falconry is an easy and accessible way for you to introduce pet ownership into your game, and a lot of the rules and suggestions that we're going to talk about are going to be applicable to any kind of pet that your player might want to have. However, the system that I've built out is entirely for raptor companions. So that means hawks, eagles, vultures, owls, and falcons. If you are interested in seeing the full written out rules, you can actually pick them up on the Dungeon Masters Guild. There'll be a link in the description below. I think they're great rules. They're personal favorites of mine. It is very niche, but it'll give you everything you need to know to run this entire system beyond just the general tips that I'm going to give in this video. So the first thing to address is, how does a player interact with this falconry system? This is handled very simply. You handle it with gear and skills. The gear can be as simple as a falconer's glove. That can be all that you might want to require for your pet. You can also get a little cage. There's a lot of little training tools. These all come together to form the falconry kit. Just like any other tool, your player's characters can gain proficiency with this kit if they want to use it to train a raptor. Alternatively, you might just allow use of the animal handling skill instead. Whether or not they're proficient with it, they can still attempt to use it, though they do not get to add their proficiency bonus if they're not proficient with it, obviously. Now, this is something you can introduce at any point in your campaigns, but you can also make it available to characters from character creation via the adaptation of a background. I've created a full-on falconer background that has all the information and unique elements that other backgrounds have, but the key asset of that background is that it gives you a falconer's kit and proficiency with it. But if you want to, you can really easily adapt an existing background to give the falconer's kit as a tool proficiency instead of another tool proficiency or another language proficiency. The City Guard is a great example. They could potentially make sense as a background that would involve falconers in certain kinds of settings. So just swap in falconer's kit for one of the other proficiencies that they get, and now your City Guard can start with a falconer's kit. And of course, if you're giving them the proficiency, then swap in the kit for an equivalent amount of gold. So they actually end up with the kit itself, as opposed to just the proficiency. Now, if I have a player who is wanting to create a character with a falconer background, I will let them start off with a raptor companion from the beginning. And that brings us to our next section, which is getting a raptor. Once your player has a kit, proficiency with it, or at least understands that that is part of the rule system that you're going to be using, the next thing they need to focus on, if they want to have a pet, is actually getting a pet. With my falconry system, players can either start with one at character creation, like I just mentioned. This might seem overpowered, but you'll see as we talk about using the pets that they're really meant to be utility, not a straight up powerhouse like a Beastmaster's companion. So they don't unbalance the game, and instead they're just a cool character element that I think will enrich a player's experience and can enrich the entire story you're telling at your table. If your players aren't starting with a companion, there's a couple other ways you could introduce a pet into the story and give them the opportunity to pick one up. Now, the easiest way is for your players to buy one. They could come across a merchant, come across a large coop, maybe a place, an area where falconry is really important to the culture. Maybe it's something that the nobles all do as a pastime, or maybe it's something that is really central to the social and cultural life of a tribe. In this case, they can probably have the option of either buying a trained raptor or an untrained one. The trained one will obviously have much more usability for them. Again, we'll get into what that means. Whereas the untrained one, they'll need to build up from scratch, but will in exchange be a lot cheaper. Alternatively, your players can try to take things into their own hands by going and catching a raptor in the wild. Now, this is going to be tough, and even if they are successful, the raptor is going to be untrained from the beginning and might even be more difficult to train because it is a completely wild beast as opposed to one that was raised for the purposes of being trained. However, it can obviously be really exciting narratively. It's a great thing for a player to do during downtime or to do over the course of a travel montage. You can run this really easy by just having a series of survival checks and perception checks as the character navigates the environment, tries to find tracks of the beasts, and then eventually an animal handling check as they try to engage the beast and either befriend it or potentially trap it. Again, in the falconry system, I go into all of this. There is a difference as to how the beast reacts if you befriend it versus if you trap it violently. Obviously, the beast in question isn't going to react as well if you're being violent in your attempts to capture it. So it's meant to be a difficult challenge, but it's not one you should lord over your players too much. If a player wants to go down this route, make it cost them some time, maybe a couple levels of exhaustion as they stake out a nest. But in the end, try to be forgiving with the DC that you set here. Let them capture the raptor if they roll well enough to do so. And trust me, there will be plenty of challenges that come along the way in trying to train up this companion and in trying to keep it alive over the course of their adventures. Done right, this can be a really engaging part of the game, and if your players feel like they really earned their companion, they're going to care a lot more for it. When the player in question does get their raptor companion, this is when you might want to introduce behavior traits, personalities. I think it's really easy to default to the common idea of the pet being super aggressive and unfriendly, but there's a lot of other interesting personality traits here that you can utilize. For example, maybe the bird is super shy, or maybe it's a bit of a trickster. It's playful, it's not malicious, but it can still be very annoying. You can decide whether these traits are positive or negative in how you use and apply them. Whatever you decide, let the creature be unique, let its personality evolve over time, and don't be afraid to overrule your players to keep all of this under control. Introducing a pet into the equation can be a really big wrench, but it can also be a source of a lot of fun and entertainment at your table. So, your player now has the tools necessary and the skill necessary, hopefully, to catch and or train up a pet. In our case, a raptor. They've also learned how to get one, whether by catching one themselves or purchasing one. The next things to consider are how to actually use the pet and how to train it over time so that it develops and grows more capable. We're going to talk about how to use the pet first, and then we're going to talk about training and development. So these are the rules that I use for pets in general, but especially for lightweight pets that are not meant to have a huge mechanical impact in combat. I don't like punishing my players for doing things that I think are interesting and exciting, so I let the players command the pet for free. Essentially, they can instruct the pet without using an action or a bonus action just by speaking on their turn. Now, these pets are not super intelligent, so it probably has to be a basic command or something that they've trained up, but if they have done so, they can do it, and there's no additional cost to it. However, the balance to that is that they do not control their pet. Their pet acts independently of them, likely on their own initiative, or you can simplify it and just have the pet act on the player's turn, and then you control their falcon or hawk or owl, eagle, vulture, whatever the pet may be. They can still roll for it when that comes up and do all of that, but ultimately how the pet acts is up to you. It's a DM's discretion sort of thing. If you're feeling overloaded, let your player control it, and essentially just feel free to overrule them if you feel like they're trying to take a mile when you're really just giving them an inch. When your raptor has to roll a skill check for a skill that it's proficient in, it adds your proficiency modifier to its rolls. That's a great way to show the development of your raptor over time. As you level up, so does your ability to command the raptor, and ideally your relationship with the raptor develops, so now it is a more effective companion. And that's really the core of it. The raptors in my falconry system are not meant to be game-breaking, huge combat assets. They're meant to be utility. They're very interesting from a roleplay point of view. They're very useful in scouting situations. They can be useful in combat as a harassing force to help you, but that is a risky move as they are rather weak and can be pretty easily taken out. But I feel like that danger really balances them out with the benefits of being such useful scouts. I want my players and their pets and allies to shine whenever possible, and instead focus on targeting them where they're weak. If they've picked a hawk and trained it up to be a really great scout, then I want to reward that. I want to reward the time and energy they're putting in there. Now, maybe I'll threaten it with archers who spot the scout, but I'm not going to have it be caught or seen every time, and I'm going to try to ensure that the player actually gets the benefit out of the things that they're putting their time into. It would be really frustrating to spend a ton of time training up a scout pet to only have it be unable to see things because the weather's not clear or some other arbitrary decision the DM makes because they want to railroad you to resolving the situation in front of you in a certain way. In a lot of cases, as a DM, by giving your players assets like a magic item or a pet in this case, you're essentially giving them enough rope to hang you with. And honestly, I think that's a big part of the fun. Those are my really simple rules for using a Raptor companion. Like I said, really basic. The players can command the Raptors for free, and the Raptor acts independently of them. That's really all you need to keep in mind, and now, voila, your players are using a pet. Where I like to make it a bit more complicated, a bit more intricate, is with the training and development, which is what we're going to talk about now. You'll notice that I said training and development. Those are distinct for a very important reason. They actually refer to two separate things. Training is the process through which you can teach your Raptor to both follow more commands and follow more complex commands. Development refers to your Raptor's growth in skill and physicality over time. You can build out the training any way you want, but in my Guide to Falconry product on the DM's Guild, I've built out a whole list of commands that your player can work on training. They're written out almost like little spells or features that your player can utilize once they've trained their Raptor to follow that specific command. That includes things like commanding your Raptor to take the attack action, take the help action, go and scout enemies in a certain area, fetch an object, and each of these different commands takes a different number of days of training. When your players go and try to buy a Raptor, you can try to buy ones that already know specific commands. And that's what distinguishes a trained Raptor from an untrained one in a purchasing scenario. In order to train a Raptor to learn one of these commands, it takes an animal handling or a falconry kit check where the DC is equal to the DC that the Raptor has to learn. So some Raptors learn more easily, some learn with more difficulty. A vulture, for example, is not as easy to train as a falcon or hawk, which are common Raptor companions because they take instructions so well. In addition, things that we've already talked about, like for example whether you've captured your pet violently, can negatively or on the other hand positively impact the training DC for your Raptor. Maybe if one of your players survives a life and death experience because of their Raptor, you can reward them with a reduced training difficulty now that the Raptor trusts them more. It's not a complicated system, but it can add quite a load as you do need to keep track of the days spent on training different commands. The easiest way to do it is just to resolve it through downtime. If your players do get some downtime between adventures, ask any players that has pets what commands they want to train during that time, and then have them roll for it successive times and decide just how many skills, how many commands would be reasonable for them to train during that downtime. You don't need to stick to my days rule that I've laid out, but I do think they are reasonably designed, so if you do want to use them, they're all on the DM's Guild there for you. Development is somehow more lightweight and more complex. I say it's more complex because it offers you a lot more options. You as a DM can decide the pace at which this happens. I tend to want to give these developments every few player levels or after a major adventure. But essentially, every time you give one, the Raptor gains access to a feat that they can choose from. These feats include things like growing in size or sharpened claws so that they actually do more damage, or making them have a healthier constitution, thicker bones, I guess, though not great for flying birds, but something that would give them higher HP. There are even unique feats for the different Raptors I've talked about. Vultures, for example, are great at detecting poison. As carrion animals, they wouldn't want to feast on poisoned remains. Hawks can unleash crazy screeches. Falcons can move incredibly fast. Each Raptor has different unique abilities, unique feats that you can unlock as they develop over time. Eagles can even be taken all the way from their base form to a giant eagle that you can ride if you want to push into a more high fantasy direction. I'm really proud of these development feats. I think they're super interesting. I think the combination of general feats that any Raptor can take and feats that are specific to different Raptors are really great. And since your player doesn't really have to do much for these, they just have to keep playing, keep leveling up, and spend time in the world for the Raptor to grow healthier, for their pet to become bigger, I think it wouldn't be that difficult for someone to ad hoc a rule where a small wolf or panther cub can grow over time to becoming something like a direwolf. So the falconry system is meant to be a really holistic system for players to acquire, use, train, and develop their pets over the course of a game. I hope that the insight into the system that I've offered in this video helps you with any sort of pet-related things you want to integrate into your games. And again, if you are interested in checking out the falconry system, head on over to the Dungeon Masters Guild to pick up the falconry system product that I created. There's going to be a link to it in the description down below. It goes into greater detail on everything I've talked about, and it even includes 5 falconer adversaries that you can include into your game. Eagle Riders or Scourge Heralds, which are like carrion prophets, essentially, that use vultures as their pets. I think they would make for really great opponents in a game, and they're a really great way to introduce falconry in a way that's natural to your game, so your players can see NPCs, can see enemies using raptors for dastardly purposes, using raptors against them. And if you really want your players to explore this, if you have enemies using falcons against them, your players are going to want to have pets of their own to combat that. That's what I think, at least. So thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching this video. And I am making this just after having hit 1,000 subscribers, so thank you for that as well. Definitely subscribe if you want to see more Dungeons & Dragons and other creative content from me. I have big plans to keep making more stuff, as long as I can keep managing it around all my other work, like creating for the Dungeon Masters Guild. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.